Welcome to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge, your front row seat to the boldest ideas and smartest strategies in the marketing game. Your host is Reed Hansen, Chief Growth Officer at MarketSurge.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge. Today we're joined by Debbie Wildrick, widely known as the Queen of Beverages, with over 30 years in the food and beverage industry. Debbie's impressive career includes executive roles at Fortune 500 companies like 7-Eleven and Tropicana North America, as well as helping hundreds of early to mid-stage brands through her strategic advisory work. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be here.
Well, I really appreciate you joining. It's always nice to have somebody with a lot of experience with some really famous brands, and excited to learn from you. And a part of your practice is, now that you are working as a coach and consultant and advisor to startup companies, you've developed the 10 Pillars framework, which we'd love to learn more about. But before we dive into that, could you share what inspired you to create a comprehensive approach like this to building successful companies?
Yes, when I first started my consulting business. By the time that I had been before 7-Eleven with Tropicana, building their single serve juice into the convenience store market as an example. I was always on a business building role, in a business building role, and building new brands, although that one was not new, but it was new to that channel, the convenience channel. And so when I went to work for 7-Eleven, I eventually ran all of beverages for 7-Eleven, and we actually were challenged to create our own products, and actually build them from the ground up, because we didn't use 7 Select as a private label or store brand name. And so I was doing that, and left and went to work for my first real startup. And so by the time that I am actually starting my consulting business, I have run 2 to 3 companies from a CEO or presidential perspective, as well as started out running the sales and marketing for FRS Healthy Energy, which was my first startup. And by the time you go through a lot of challenges and learnings with being with this startup, and then how do we get to market, and how are we ticking on each elements. And so by the time that I actually start my consulting business with some partners, which was Metabrand at the time and still is, they it, it, what we did is I wrote the 10 pillars with the intention of eventually writing a book and a course, which is what I'm in the process of doing. And it was really about how do we have a platform that we can talk to clients about, based on our experiences and based on what you need to, what elements you really need to move forward. And so it was comprehensive, based on all my experiences and verticals. And then how do we share with the client what we do? And we can help you in any number of these areas, depending on your experience or lack of experience. So that's the passion behind it, which is a very long story, but
No,
gives you a little bit more about my background too.
no, that's great. And you've obviously had a great career in as a practitioner leading these actual implementations. And so I would imagine that so many companies could really benefit from your experience. Now, that said, you've worked with all kinds of companies. You've worked with startups, Fortune 500s. What have been some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing companies make, regardless of their size? I imagine there's similar themes you've observed over your time in both
Yeah,
7-Eleven and consulting.
yeah. I mean, even going back to what large companies have a tendency to, where they make their bigger mistakes, but it rolls all the way down to, being the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur, so if you're a small, mid-stage, um, especially, just starting out, there could be a lack of experience in all aspects. And so the smaller companies, the entrepreneur comes up with an idea and really doesn't understand their true market opportunity or consumer need. And that it can take an extensive amount of research, and on top of that, which is pillar number two, is product differentiation. And so the smaller the business, that's, early on, the idea is there, but did I really do my research to understand if this idea is going to work in the marketplace? And of course, the larger the company, the it, the research that they're doing to establish those criteria is happening because in order to introduce or launch new brands inside larger companies, you have to prove your return on investment and so forth. And so, but we're still making, if we don't understand those first two pillars and know that we've got a viable business, a viable product, then it we find it even harder to figure out how to message to the consumer when it ends up when our branding strategies and so forth. And the larger companies make these mistakes just as easily, and then the very last part, especially during execution, and this is regardless of size too, is that marketing and sales are are not talking to each other, are broken until marketing has already established that this is the brand, this is who we are, whether we've launched into the market and haven't been successful or have been successful, is that marketing and sales are really not talking to each other, and it's critical that they talk to each other.
Yeah. Let's follow that thread, and um, let's touch on some of these pillars that you've talked about. Now, so to your point, in your first pillar, it's based around market opportunity and consumer needs. So, as you said, so how can entrepreneurs, for instance, tell the difference between a genuine market opportunity and just a cool product idea that maybe would be fun for them to make? And does what you talked about with marketing and sales needing to communicate, does that apply here?
Yeah, it certainly does. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, obviously you may be marketing, sales, and all of the above
Right, right.
operations, of course, right?
Absolutely.
That's how it starts out. But um, more more so in the beginning, a lot of product ideas come up because the entrepreneur really thinks that they're a cool idea. They're a great idea. And in the last 30 to 45 days, I've had three energy drink companies come to me. Um, and one's already been in the market for a couple of years. The other one is fairly new, as an example. And they really don't, they really can't, um, certainly energy is easy because it is one of the fastest growing um, um, categories still to this day. But how do you really differentiate yourself, and how do you really get to market? And so yeah, it's a challenge because the entrepreneur comes up with a great idea that they think they have a cool energy drink, and I'm using that one as an example, without really understanding that maybe that's already been on the market. I had somebody a couple of years ago call me up and said that they wanted to introduce a natural energy drink, and I I point blank, after I challenged them several questions on what was their differentiation point, which they could not pinpoint, other than I just want something that's totally natural. And I said, have you been to have you been to the shelf in the Whole Foods market lately? There's a whole 4 foot section of natural energy drinks.
Right.
So that's it. It's just so easy to. It's usually a need that you have
Mm.
that you've not been able to find the product
Yeah.
on the market, and so you go about doing it, but it takes it even if your research there's lots of research obviously on it, AI and the internet these days with regard to market share and where is the trend upward. um, at my website, by the way, I did a market opportunity and consumer need overview, which is a free
Mhm.
download. Um, that that really takes you through all the steps that can help you understand that. And that's as simple as going to multiple types of outlets and looking at the shelf where your product would actually be purchased from, and looking and studying your competition and understanding how they're speaking to the consumer, understanding whether or not the product that you've really developed, it does have a differentiation point after you've done the market opportunity. So yeah, it's I think it's one of our weak areas, but if you really do the research, and we just did it for another client that's launching um, a a a prebiotic sparkling water with benefits, and he's ended up doing a fabulous job on market research and opportunity. But I had to help lead him there, and it was a really fun journey, just over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, uh, a couple follow-ups on that, because I know a lot of people, as you described, they have like a business, like maybe there's something they really like to make, or uh, they like envision themselves doing a certain kind of producing a certain kind of product rather than trying to solve a or fill a market gap. Um, and I think that's really wise to think about the gaps and the opportunities and what the consumers are missing. And but a couple things. Is there a way that you can uh, re- like, are there certain metrics that an entrepreneur could look at to evaluate those gaps or the need in the market? And then do you have a certain process to help guide or shepherd these entrepreneurs through this same process?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the overview that I was just
Yeah.
talking about
Mhm.
earlier is a step by step. What are the things that I need to do, and
Okay.
and and part of starting out as a webinar series course is actually going to be um, exercises and learning, so that so that you can really understand, rather than just me putting it on paper for you, and taking you through. Now, if I'm working for you from a consulting perspective, then verbally we'll start going through all that, and that's what we did over the last couple of weeks. And it's it's something that you if you take yourself through all the steps of what are the trends, defining the trends, the category, etc. You just brought up, some people like to make things. I make the best pasta sauce in the
Right.
world, right? So I'm going to bottle this, and you get into a category like that, where you know you may not have really a good differentiating point. So what are you doing? You're telling a story, and that's when we get into the other
Yeah.
parts of, once you've done the first two pillars and you understand and you've done your research, and like you asked, I do take you to a step-by-step process to get that done. Then you you move into brand messaging and brand strategy. And so how do I speak to the consumer? And the example, which happens so many times, of wanting to bottle my pasta sauce, is a great example. It it really becomes what your story is.
Mm. Okay, no, that makes sense. Well, so let's talk a little bit more about that. What, there's, um, to escape out of just being one of many on the shelf, one of many products on a shelf. Um, how does effective storytelling work? What do consumers, like, in the beverage industry, what do they care about when it comes to storytelling? Like, they may not care that you tried, um, you failed in a bunch of different things and then finally arrived on, um, this unique thing.
No.
Like, what do they care about in these stories and messaging?
Well, it's a lot of it's a lot about passion, and especially like I've spent a couple of different times doing a premium bottled
Mm,
water line. And um, aside from the fact that one example is very differentiated, but what does it really mean to me? What does it really mean to me? And happens to be the world's purest ever discovered water. And but what does it mean to me?
mm,
What does that mean to me? And so that's how we have to convey in our messaging. And in that particular example, we have this magical story about how the water comes all the way up from the underneath the Amazon rainforest and comes through rose quartz, and by the time that it gets to the surface, it only has several total dissolved solids. But we have to turn that into a magical story that actually tells me what it means to me. And in that particular example, it's about taste, and it's about just, you know a lot of products are based on, holding in my hand, because I either had a celebrity influencer that was able to really move the needle forward, or it's just a really, really cool package, and I feel good about also having it in my hand. And those are that's even tougher than having a story. My grandmother made my grandmother taught me how to make the pasta sauce, and this is what we did, and we built it into a story about how I got to where I did, and what kind of ingredients I did, and it can go certainly a lot deeper than that. The tea
mm,
industry. I mean, there's teas coming from all over the world, and you may work with farmers in Asia, and that's where you got your tea leaves, and how you're helping to support them. So yeah, there's all different ways of really incorporating storytelling into the passion behind your brand, and to give the consumer a reason to buy. And it could be as simple as being magical, as well as taste, and uh, where it comes from and how you build that story. It's I think it's critical.
yeah. Well, there's obviously storytelling at the beginning, to introduce a brand, but then there's a situation where a brand may want to kind of freshen up their image and introduce a story. They've been around for years or decades. And, is there a different approach for a brand that wants to introduce a new story, or tell the story arc of how they got, or how they got to where they are today? Does that functionally work differently, or just thought that's an
Yeah, I mean,
angle.
you might start out with a certainly, and I say this a lot. It may be in the life of a brand, they could they could go through, and especially just in the first couple of years, you may go through two or three package design and brand messaging changes. And I just did a piece. I picked up some of Brad's um, Caesar salad mix is what it was really called, but it had mostly like kale and spinach in it, all like Brad's kale chips were originally. Well, the I did a little piece on it because they've completely marketed it
Mm.
differently. It caught my eye, even though I've known Brad's for years. Brad is no longer involved, but the early stages of that brand had his picture on the back and you know, how he decided to build the kale chip line because he wanted something healthy to eat, blah blah blah. And so they've totally rebranded it, and now it is still called Brad's, but a completely different marketing message, simplified and calls to action. And um, so it could be constantly evolving, but you know what? You have to also be constantly looking at your turns, your velocities, what retailers you're selling in better than the others. Have you done, sampling and consumer focus groups and um, any number of things to decide where you need to take the brand to the next level, which is one of the things that I really I love about the 10 pillars concept, because if you're a mid-stage company and you're struggling or you're wanting to scale and you don't know all of what's really happened along the way, then how do you know what to make changes? How do you know what's working and what's not working? And so all 10 of those pillars in evaluating a business from all of those points is critical to understanding how I'm going to make a brand change, when I'm going to make a brand change, and how it needs to move forward from there.
So um, let's talk a little bit about one of your subsequent pillars, number 7, marketing strategies. So you this covers a lot, about, for instance, promotions and even social media. But a question is that for many in our audience, they have limited resources, not infinite resources, and
Hmm.
have to make some decisions about what they emphasize, like maybe in terms of channels. What would you recommend that brands prioritize, or how they think through that process when their resources are limited?
Yeah, almost every entrepreneur, pillar number 10 is financials.
Mm.
Um, but so it's difficult. The one thing that I do say, so if you've got the package messaging, as when I when I go when I go to the shelf and there's a new product on the shelf, all I really have, because I haven't had a chance to market it yet, if I'm using social media and I've got 100,000 Facebook followers, maybe, but I haven't even totally reached the surface,
Hmm.
right? So at the beginning of any new product launch, all you really have is at the shelf.
Hmm.
And the first thing that you need to do is catch the eye of of the consumer. And so hopefully you've really studied your positionings and where you want to be positioned on the shelf, the merchandising tactics and so forth, that you're working with the retailer on. But all you have is at the shelf, and so you want the consumer to, at least, if the consumer touches the bottle, or food, this applies to food and beverage products. If they touch the bottle and even turn it around, chances of them buying it are much much greater. So you're also trying to get that to happen, and then um but using promotional tactics that are encouraging multiple buys, working with the retailer appropriately on their promotional strategies so that you're also getting those shelf tags
Mm.
in the beginning of your product. And that can be difficult when you're short on resources. Obviously, you've hopefully built your plan according to being able to promote at about 15% across the board, even though it's targeted along the the year. But it is expensive, but it's building that into your plan so that as you begin to move the product off the shelf and into the consumer's hands over and over, you're increasing your distribution, you're getting your distribution points, then you can start marketing to the consumer outside of the store shelves. But you really, that's where the strategy comes in. So first first the brand and packaging and what you're saying to them right there on the package, and then really working with your retailers to start out those shelf promotionals so you're getting your product called out, and then um, working to the social and other aspects of marketing.
No, that's really interesting, and um, I know you've worked with so many different brands, and we're not really going to be able to go super in depth in a short podcast, but I'd be interested, in a couple things. How have you seen social media affect marketing for beverage and CPG brands? And then have you seen anything unconventional that surprisingly worked really well?
Well, one of the best examples is Prime. I'm not sure if you're
Yeah, I am.
familiar with
Uh-huh.
Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is by far one of the biggest anomalies. And the guys that owned it had the luxury of having um of the main found the main influencer. I can't remember. Paul is his
Mhm.
name, something. But anyway, he already had 25 million
Right.
followers, and I referenced this before. We think as entrepreneurs, we think in today's world of social media that it is, um, our lives are much easier, right, in building brands, but um, you have to reach people, and so Prime did it in lightning speed and did it with tons and tons of video and creative content, and really was able to do that. But like I said, it's an anomaly. And so the factors of really successfully marketing your product are um, a combination, well, 10, all 10 pillars, but a combination of really ticking in all areas so that um you've got a place for the to tell the consumer where to go, and you've got your sales and distribution, and you're really talking to them. But um
Yeah. No, that's
that's really what it. Oh, and in classic, this goes back for years and years. Don't ever um don't ever make a decision that um I start working your social media and spending a lot of money on advertising as an example, but you don't have your distribution in place
mm,
yet, so you don't have anywhere to sell, to direct the consumer. And that's why D2C is also so prevalent today, and getting on Amazon and having your own website and really working your own website, because you don't you can direct the consumer to your website if you're doing early marketing, um, when you don't have it on the shelf. And you can also manage your retailer strategy so that you're not spreading yourself too thin. You're going into a market and you're saying, I need these and these retailers, and this is how we'll go about getting those in business. So it's a combination of all of that.
Okay. No, yeah, I think that is good to take a deliberate approach. It seems really easy just to turn on ads, but if you're not ready to receive, distribute, and have your basically your marketing act together, it's money down the tube. Now, there's so much obviously to cover, and I'd love to help direct people that are interested to learn more about what you do, and I'm sure they'd be interested in consulting with you. Where are the best places for listeners to find you?
So at my website, which is
Okay.
DebbieWildrick.com, and it's DebbieWildrick.com. That the website has my phone number, it has my email address, it has a contact page. So any of those ways of getting to me, also a calendar page as well. But I also have at free, it's just free.debbiewildrick.com. If you go to that landing page, you can put in your email address, and I'll send you a download for that white paper on pillar number one, market opportunity and consumer need, and there's then there's also an opportunity for us to talk around that as well.
Fantastic. Well, Debbie, it was a pleasure, and I'm glad we've connected. And I would direct anybody thinking about growing a brand in the CPG, specifically beverage space, to connect with you. Thanks so much for joining us today, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Want to stay ahead of what's actually working in marketing right now? Head over to MarketSurge.io and see how we're helping businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. That's MarketSurge.io, because your next breakthrough shouldn't be a guess.